Alright, and my last video went over the AI atmosphere volume, and in this case, ooh god, stop the render. In this case, I'm going to just break that connection and show you what an AI fog looks like and what you can do with that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on progressive refinement and turn these settings way the heck down, and see what this gets us. Oof, nothing good is the answer to that. So the AI fog is a little bit weird, and I always have issues trying to refine this because it always ends up looking pretty crazy. There we go. All right, what am I doing? So by default, it basically turns a bunch of stuff white in your scene, and it's pretty weird to sort of look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sort of zoom out a little bit, and I might just turn the height down. So what you can do, these are kind of weird, where like you can see, so basically what's happening here, you can see the tip of this candle, and the rest of it is basically covered in fog. So if we were to, move this candle thing out, you can see it is basically emerging from a giant unholy wall of fog, which looks completely insane. I find these and my scene is not modeled to scale at all, so that definitely does not help when trying to modify these settings. But if we're looking at this, so we have options, like right now, like I said, let's say I'm shooting for candle in a foggy swamp where there's like some fog around the floor or something weird. If we look at the ground normal, that is basically the X, Y, or Z, and where basically it's going to draw like a plane sort of, if that makes sense, along these lines. So I'm going to pause this real quick. I'm also going to make this tiny. So right now if we look at this, so our X-axis is pretty much, going from this direction here. Y is standard Y, and Z is sort of coming across this way. So if we were, say, to change our Z to 0, we then have no fog. Like, this is basically saying, hey, there's no fog in the scene. What we can do is set the ground normal to 1 on the Y, and this isn't so much operating as like units. It's basically almost like degrees of rotation, if that makes any sense at all. So like the height is the units basically. And this is what I get for not modeling my scene at all to scale. So if we do like 0.002, you can see that gets a little bit higher, like it's sort of bringing that fog a little bit up the candle here. If we do 0.005, it basically is just getting foggier and foggier and foggier. So this is the setting you want to do to figure out like, hey, which axis am I actually supposed to be putting the fog on? Like, do you want fog hanging from the ceiling or vice versa? You can also set the ground point. So my understanding of this is basically, this is if you wanted, say, this to start 5 units up, you could set this to 5, or you could set this to -5. And the reason you might want to set it to -5 is so that you could do some kind of sort of more aggressive fade on this, like you have a little bit more control sort of over the height and where you are in the gradient of that fog, if that makes any sense at all. But this is sort of how you can use this. You can change the color of this, so I am feeling kind of like weird, sketchy, murky, swampy. That's an aesthetic that I like. So you can go through and sort of like change the color of this if you want to. And honestly, like a lot of times when I'm playing with this kind of stuff, I'm just like, cool, what does this random setting do? And I just sort of start playing with things. In a very haphazard, like I literally just start punching in random numbers kind of way. So honestly, I'm not entirely sure what distance does. It seems like it is going through and just sort of smaller numbers will let you see further through the fog, basically. Whereas like if I set this value to 10, which is what I just had it becomes sort of much denser, but I could be entirely wrong on that. But you can see it does do some really fun things with that candle there. where you're just sort of seeing like that glow. And when you're doing this, this is what I was like kind of shooting for earlier with those really nice sort of circles on the wall that you get from candles. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this back to something maybe like 0.1. I'll set my height to 5. And again, like when you change one setting, it kind of changes all the settings. But this is basically, you know, AI fog. And when in general, when you're using this stuff, I do recommend, wherever possible, working to scale. The whiter you make stuff, generally the denser the fog looks compared to sort of black. But I recommend working at scale. It's going to make all these numbers way easier to control, just in general. If you wanted to, you could do some weird stuff where you make like diagonal fog. I've not personally found a use for this, but you can do that if you need to, just by entering, you know, different sort of values into here. In this case, again, I think that looks kind of insane, so I'm just going to kind of not do that. And out of curiosity, I went ahead and entered a negative value into the Y for -1, and it kind of went through and theoretically, unless I'm very much remembering this incorrectly, it's been a while since I've actually used the fog, practically. But theoretically, you could use that to reverse the direction of your fog, which I seem to be lousing up pretty gosh darn aggressively. So I'm just going to go back and Control-Z that to do whatever I had before. And I'm going to go in and see if I can find that original render angle that I had. But you can see, I mean, it pretty much does just apply a giant fog throughout your scene. So I'm going to go ahead and let this render. And cool, that looks really strange. And basically what we have, I'm actually going to see if I can make that a little bit more pronounced, because All right, so let's see, 4 perhaps. All right, sure, that's kind of all right. So basically, different stuff, I'll just sort of let this render, and you guys can see different things you can do with this. And this one does generally take slightly less time to render. So you can see it's not doing the cool thing where it like bounces the light through the fog so much. This is more just like if you want sort of static effects in your scene, like, you know, like I said, like a weird miasma or something like that. But it also isn't, I set my samples way lower, and it's not having explosive issues with sampling blowing up, which is always fun. But you can also use this for stuff, like I said, if you're doing, you know, trying to like fake an underwater scene where things that are farther away are going to be really heavily occluded. You could set up like a little fog, a little AI fog, and just sort of set it to be, you know, on the X over Z axis like it was originally. And basically, if you look straight into it, it'll end up making the fog, like the closer to the camera, it'll be less occluded, and the far away you get, the fog will sort of take over and start blurring out basically the rest of your stuff in the scene. And you can see it doing that a little bit here with the molding on the floor, where like the farther away you get from the camera, you're looking through more fog, so the fog kind of blocks the background a little bit more. But I do enjoy fog. It is a fun way to do things. And I have, if I would stop navigating away from the folder every 4 seconds, I have comparisons of what all of these different things look like. So I have, here's just my crappy original flame candle that I did. I messed with the sampling a little bit after this and added some molding to the background. So this is no fog, just the basic sampling settings, whatever I've been using for pretty much all the scenes for the shaders. This is with the AI environmental volume, and this is where you get the nice sort of light effect coming in, and like the light is sort of bouncing. You get that little sort of red glow right around the candle flame. Probably made my settings for that like a wee bit intense. And then this is the environmental fog, where the light is not so much affecting it, but you just sort of get that very nice like directional, like weird sort of misty candle floating along misty lake effect. So